The wind ran ragged across the hills, dragging curls of dust over the long-dead fence line, like fingers brushing a forgotten grave. The sun, swollen and low, smeared gold and blood across the sky as it sank into the earth, and every breath of heat from the day clung stubbornly to the dirt. Elias Boone sat hunched on the porch of his ranch house, elbows on knees, hat pulled low over a face worn smooth by silence. Behind him, the house groaned with the weight of emptiness. No footsteps, no laughter, just the ticking of an old wall clock that hadn't struck an hour in years. Out here, time wasn't measured in minutes. It was measured in seasons and scars, in how many nights you could survive without speaking a word. The cattle were already penned, the chickens fed, the water troughs glimmered faintly in the dying light. There was nothing left to do, nothing but wait for night to press down and erase everything. And still, Elias stayed seated. Habit, maybe, or punishment. He had once been a man of purpose, a husband, a father, a scout during the war, before that title turned bitter in his mouth. Then came the woman with fire in her eyes and wind in her step, and he'd given her a name to share. Then came a fever and a child buried beneath stacked stones. After that, there was only dry ground and the ghost of her voice when the wind shifted. So when the riderless horse bolted over the far ridge, hooves a blur, mane tangled and wild, Elias didn't stand. Not at first. It wasn't until the animal stumbled, one leg soaked in blood, and collapsed in a heap of dust near the dry creek bed that he shifted forward, squinting into the haze. Another shape followed it, smaller, faster. She came like something chased from hell, barefoot, thin as a reed. Her long black hair streamed behind her like a battle flag, and her legs kicked up powder in frantic bursts. Her tunic was torn at the hem, her arms scratched raw, and a crust of dry blood ringed one shoulder. She didn't slow until she reached the slumped horse, falling hard to her knees beside it. One hand pressed to its heaving side. The other gripped something tucked into her belt, a crude blade made from bone and leather. Elias stood slowly, every joint protesting the motion. He didn't call out, didn't wave, just stepped off the porch and walked toward the girl with the caution of a man approaching a cornered mountain cat. She looked up when she heard his boots. Her eyes were fierce, full of distrust, yet not afraid. Not exactly. She looked like someone who'd already passed through fear and come out the other side. Changed. She bared her teeth in warning, clutching the blade tighter. Blood matted her shoulder and ran down her ribs. Her breath came in gasps, and still she crouched, ready to strike. Elias lifted both hands, palms open. "You're on my land," he said, voice gravel soft. "I ain't here to harm you." Her eyes flicked to the knife, then back to him. She didn't speak. "You're hurt," he added. "That horse, too." No answer. Just the sound of the wounded creature's shallow breathing and the low whistle of wind between brittle stalks. Then, in a voice hoarse from disuse or defiance, she rasped a single word. "Water." He nodded once, turned, and walked to the pump near the porch. She didn't follow, but she watched him like a hawk might watch a trap being set. Elias returned with a tin cup and a canteen. He set them on the ground 10 paces from her, then stepped back. She reached out slowly, not taking her eyes off him, and snatched the cup. The water vanished in seconds. She wiped her mouth with the back of her wrist and sagged slightly, the fight draining from her limbs, though not her gaze. "What's your name?" he asked. Nothing, just a stare, unreadable and taut. "Don't gotta tell me," he added. "I don't need to know." The horse let out a final shuddering breath and stilled. She flinched. Her hand fell from its side. For a moment, the mask cracked. Grief curled at the edges of her mouth like smoke. She closed her eyes, just long enough to hide the loss, then stood, slowly, unsteadily. Her body betrayed her. She swayed and dropped. Elias was beside her before she hit the ground. She was light, almost nothing in his arms, a slip of muscle and bone wrapped in torn deerskin and bruises. Her blade clattered against a rock. Her breath smelled faintly of pine sap and blood. He didn't ask himself why he carried her inside. He just did. The house was dim, the air inside still. He laid her on the old cot that hadn't been used since the last time someone needed a place to die. Her shoulder was badly dislocated, and her feet were torn raw from running. He fetched a cloth, boiled water, and began cleaning her wounds. She didn't wake. She just lay there, brows drawn, jaw clenched like she was fighting something in her sleep. When he slipped her knife from her belt, he paused. Carved into the bone handle was a single word in Apache, Delochidi, wildflower, the same word his wife had whispered in his ear once, long ago, when they first lay beneath the canyon stars. His hands trembled. He wrapped the blade in cloth and set on the mantel. By the time the moon had risen, she stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, fever-bright and unfocused. When she saw him beside her, she tried to rise, but her body gave out. Her voice was barely audible. "Where am I?" "My ranch," he said. She didn't relax, didn't ask more. She simply blinked and drifted off again. Elias stayed in his chair through the night, dozing in short spells. Each time he woke, he expected her to be gone, but each time she remained. The next morning, she didn't speak. She walked barefoot around the room, testing her limbs, wary as a creature recovering from a trap. She picked at the bread he left on the table, drank deeply from the well bucket, and studied his every movement. He offered her a clean tunic, one his wife once wore. She stared at it, then at him. She took it and retreated behind a curtain. Later that day, she moved outside, squinting at the sun as though it might judge her. She knelt beside the grave under the juniper tree, the only one marked, a smooth stone without a name. She didn't ask who was buried there. He didn't tell her. That night, they ate in silence. When he brought out a small tin of honey, she let the faintest curve ghost across her mouth. It was not a smile, but it wasn't nothing. After supper, he stepped outside to light his pipe. The sky was velvet black, stars strewn like salt across a table. He heard the screen door creak behind him, soft footsteps brushing the porch. She stood beside him, arms folded, still barefoot. He didn't speak. Neither did she. They just watched the night together, two shadows leaning against a world that had stopped waiting for them. Then she broke the silence. "They'll come." He turned, slow. "Men," she added, "chased me. Saw them 2 days back. Might still be close." Elias's jaw tightened. He nodded once. "I'm not afraid," she said, voice low. He didn't say she should be. Instead, he flicked ash into the dirt and murmured, "Then you'll need your strength and a saddle." Her eyes lifted to his. For the first time, they didn't hold suspicion, only understanding. And something colder moved in behind that moment. Something neither of them said aloud. The kind of storm that doesn't come with rain. The next morning came pale and quiet, as if the sun itself had paused to listen before rising. Elias Boone woke early, long before the rooster, and moved about the house with the same methodical silence that had shaped his life. He boiled water, stoked the hearth, and laid out 2 chip plates, though one of them hadn't been used in years. The girl, Naeli, though she had yet to offer a name, sat cross-legged near the door, arms wrapped tight around her knees, eyes open and watching like she hadn't slept at all. She ate without a word, tearing the bread with her fingers, dipping it into broth he'd made from leftover beans and bones. She did not thank him. He did not expect her to. Some wounds run too deep for language. Some hungers speak for themselves. Elias noted how she moved now, stiff, cautious, but stronger than the day before. Her fever had broken, though a faint flush still clung to her cheeks. He said nothing, just refilled her cup and went about his chores. She followed him outside like a shadow, silent and barefoot, stepping around patches of ice as they walked the morning fence line. She didn't flinch at the rifle slung over his back, nor when the cattle bawled at their passing. Her eyes stayed on the horizon, scanning, always scanning. At the edge of the pasture, Elias stopped and pointed toward the barn. "Roof's got a leak," he said. "If you're set on staying a bit longer, there's work in it." She glanced at him, then nodded once. And so it began. They passed the next 2 days without ceremony. She helped mend the roof, gather eggs, salt the venison. He taught her how to brace her shoulder properly while holding a rifle, how to set a snare, how to speak to the animals so they'd listen. Not a lot of words passed between them, but the space between words grew easier to bear. Sometimes she hummed under her breath when she worked. He recognized none of the songs, but they curled around the air like incense, softening the sharp edges of the place. On the third morning, Elias woke to find her standing at the edge of the cottonwood grove, staring up at the hill where the juniper grave lay. She had braided her hair tight and wore the old tunic he'd given her with the belt tied high across her waist. She looked smaller than she was, and yet older, as if time had passed unevenly over her. He joined her, boots crunching frost. She didn't move when he arrived beside her. "She yours?" Naeli asked, nodding toward the grave. "My wife," he said, "and our boy. Both." She said nothing. He didn't elaborate. "I was 12 when they burned our village," she said after a long silence. "Took me with the horses. Thought I was worth something. But I wasn't, not to them." Elias swallowed. The wind shifted. "I ran the first chance I got," she added. "Killed one. The other two will want to finish what they started. Then they'll find me first," he said, "and regret it." She looked at him then, truly looked, like she was trying to understand whether he meant it or if he was just another man playing at kindness. That night, while the fire cracked and shadows leaned across the walls, Naeli crossed the room and sat at the foot of Elias's chair. She held something wrapped in leather, a pouch she had never set down, not even while asleep. She untied it and spilled its contents into her lap. A broken arrowhead, a lock of hair bound in red string, a child's beaded bracelet. "My mother's," she said simply. "I kept what I could." Elias nodded. "My wife used to sing when she ground corn. Said songs were prayers the wind could carry." Naeli smiled faintly. She was right. They sat in silence, the kind that feels full, not empty. The firelight danced across their faces, flickering between memory and the moment. When she finally rose, she left the pouch open on the hearth. In the morning, the world returned to them. The sound of hooves echoed up the canyon trail, slow and deliberate. Naeli froze at the table, her hands tightening around the tin cup. Elias stood from his chair, motioning her toward the back room. "Go," he said. "Stay low." She didn't argue, just slipped out of sight. He opened the front door before the knock came. Sheriff Dodd sat tall in the saddle, two of the men behind him, ranchers from Dry Willow, both of them known for their easy cruelty and rough hands. Dodd tipped his hat. "Boone," he drawled. "Been a while." Elias crossed his arms. "Too long. We're out looking for someone. Apache girl. Stole a horse. Slid a man's got open down near Hollow Bend. Can't help you." Dodd narrowed his eyes. "Word is she was seen heading this way." Elias didn't flinch. "Word's often wrong. Folks say you've gone strange, Boone. Living up here alone. Talking to ghosts. I find them more honest in the living." The sheriff's lips twitched into something close to a smile, though his eyes stayed cold. "You see anything strange, let me know." "I will." Dodd waited a beat, then turned his horse. "Take care, Boone. Storm's coming." When they rode off, Elias shut the door and leaned against it for a moment longer than needed. His breath left him slow. Naeli emerged from the back, hands clenched. "They'll be back." "I know," he said, "but so will the sun." Later that afternoon, she worked alongside him in the barn. They repaired the chicken wire, hammered boards into place where winter wind had pried them loose. Their hands moved in rhythm, two survivors shaping the world into something that might hold. As dusk settled, Elias brought out the old saddlebag, his wife's, the one he kept stored in the attic beneath boxes of dried flowers and moldy linen. He handed it to Naeli without a word. She ran her fingers over the worn leather, tracing the faded initials. "I'm not her," she said quietly. "I know," he answered, "but you ain't no less." She turned away, blinking too fast. That evening, after dinner, Naeli approached him holding a rifle. She cradled it as if it were something sacred. "Teach me to aim right," she said. He nodded. They walked outside into the blue hush of twilight. He set bottles on fence posts, steadying them with stones. Then he showed her how to plant her feet, how to breathe, how to squeeze, not pull. The trigger, the first shot missed by a hand's width. The second cracked the bottle clean in half. She grinned without showing her teeth. He gave her a single nod of approval. The night cooled. Crickets began their slow hymn in the brush. Coyotes howled miles off. Naeli sat beside the fire later than usual, her eyes reflecting its flicker. Elias watched her from the doorway. She turned toward him, something unresolved in her gaze. "They won't stop," she said. "Then neither will we," he answered. She stood, crossed the room, placed something small in his hand. It was the beaded bracelet. "For your wife's son," she whispered, "so he won't be alone." Elias looked down at the tiny band of woven color, and the weight of it settled deep in his chest. When he looked up, she had already returned to her cot, one hand curled around her pouch, the other resting gently on the rifle beside her. The fire crackled low. The wind changed directions. And somewhere far off, a crow called once and went silent. The storm rolled in at dusk, not with rain but with silence, the kind that press against your ribs and whisper to things coming undone. Wind chased dust in wild spirals across the yard, lifting old leaves and memories in its wake. The cattle moved uneasily along the fence line, and the sky darkened to a bruised purple, as if the land itself were holding its breath. Inside the house, Elias Boone stood by the window, one hand resting on the edge of the sill, eyes fixed on the trail. He hadn't spoken much since morning, not since he found a small pile of stones Naeli had built near the juniper grave, her offering quiet and unadorned, but sacred in a way that didn't need words. Naeli sat at the table, fingers busy rewrapping the handle of her bone knife with fresh leather strips. Her hair was braided back tight, her face calm. She had learned that calm from him, from watching how he moved through the world, not untouched, but deliberate. "They'll come before dawn," she said. Elias didn't turn. "I know. I can leave now. Ride hard, lose in the gorge." He shook his head. "Wouldn't matter. They're not chasing a girl anymore. They're chasing the idea of one." She looked up. "Then what are they really after?" "Blood. Proof. A reason to remind this land who owns what." The air grew heavier. The fire snapped low in the hearth. She stood, moved to the door, opened it wide. The wind caught her shawl, flung it around her like wings. She stared into the gathering dark, as if daring it to speak first. Elias watched her with something close to awe. She had arrived a girl wrapped in thorns, all teeth and suspicion. Now she stood tall, a blade honed by flame and silence, steady in her conviction. "I was never meant to survive," she said, voice low. "Not after what they did." He crossed the room, laid a hand gently on her shoulder. "You didn't just survive," he said. "You burned." The sound of hooves broke through the night. Naeli turned, her breath slow but sure. 3 riders crested the ridge, lanterns swinging from their saddles like false stars. Elias recognized the shape of the sheriff's mount, the squared shoulders of the man beside him, and the shotgun slung too casual across his back. Elias stepped outside, rifle in hand, not raised. He stood at the edge of the porch, boots planted firm in the earth. Dodd dismounted first, the others following close behind. The sheriff looked tired, but not uncertain. "We're not here to talk, Boone," he said. "I gave you your chance." "Then what's this?" Elias asked. Dodd squinted. "Obligation." He nodded toward the house. "You know she killed one of mine." "I know she survived what you let happen," Elias said. "The second man, Stocker, a rancher known for cruel cattle and crueler politics, spat into the dirt. We ain't here for sermons." "You came armed," Elias noted, "but not righteous." Dodd's hand moved toward his sidearm. That's when Naeli stepped out from behind the doorway. She moved like a whisper through thunder, bare feet silent on the porch boards, her shoulders straight, her face unreadable. The rifle rested against her hip, not aimed. She didn't need to point it. Her presence was enough. "Tell them," Elias murmured. She took one step forward, her eyes locking with the sheriff's. "My name is Naeli. I was taken. I ran. I defended myself. If that makes me guilty, then let them call you innocent." The wind surged. Dodd faltered, just slightly, enough for truth to settle heavy on the scene. "We should take her," Stocker muttered. But the third rider, a younger man Elias didn't know, shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. "She's a girl," he muttered. "Not what I expected." Elias met Dodd's stare. "You think dragging her back to town proves something?" he asked. "Proves what? That you own her? That men like you always win." Dodd's jaw worked, clenched, then relaxed. "She can't stay here forever." "She won't have to," Elias said. "But while she's here, she ain't prey." The sheriff said nothing. Then, after a long breath, he turned his horse and rode off without a word. The other two followed, though Stocker spat once more into the dust before disappearing into the dark. Elias didn't move until the sound of hooves had faded completely. The night collapsing on itself, quiet now, like something had exhaled after a long, clenched hold. Naeli lowered her rifle. They didn't speak. There was no need. What had passed between them didn't belong to language. It lived in marrow, in breath. That night, the storm came in earnest. Thunder rolled like distant drums. Rain hit the roof in soft, deliberate fingers. Elias found her curled on the floor beside the hearth, not asleep, but resting. He brought her a blanket. As he turned to leave, her voice caught him. "You didn't have to lie for me." "I didn't," he said. She nodded. "Then why stay? Why fight?" He hesitated. "Because there's still things worth keeping warm, even if they burn." The next morning, the land was washed clean. The sky blazed open and blue. Naeli saddled one of the Mustangs Elias rarely rode. One he once planned to break, but never could. It stood still for her. "You could come with me," she said, half turning. He stood at the porch, arms crossed, eyes narrowed against the sun. "I've got Ghost to tend," he said. She smiled. "Then I'll leave you one less." She reached into her satchel, pulled out the pouch she always carried, and removed the bracelet, the one with the beads Elias had mended during the long nights. She handed it to him. "For your son," she said, "in case he's still listening." He took it without a word, and then she rode. No fanfare, no dramatic gallop, just a quiet glide into the wide, sunlit plain, her silhouette growing smaller with each stride, until she was part of the horizon, stitched into it like a promise. Elias watched until he could no longer tell where she ended and the earth began. He stepped back inside the house, laid the bracelet on the mantel beside his wife's saddlebag, and sat in the chair by the fire. The house was still, but it no longer felt hollow. The door creaked softly behind him, just the wind, but it felt like something else. Some shift, some truth long buried, rising again. And maybe that was the thing about fire. It didn't only destroy. Sometimes it cleared the brush. Sometimes it made room for something wild to grow again. Something that rode hard, but never looked back, because it already knew who it was, and who it never needed to become. And sometimes all a man could do was let go of the reins, and be grateful he ever held them at all.